Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brent Cotter. I'm a professor of law at the University of Saskatchewan's College of Law and a member of the Canadian Senate. I'm here on behalf of the Speakers Committee at the College of Law, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the first episode, episode 1 of 4, in a special series that we have put together entitled Re-Envisioning Policing in Canada. This event is presented as part of the McKercher LLP lecture series at the College of Law. As we gather virtually today, I know many of you are in different locations in the city or province or country. I acknowledge that I'm on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nation and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. I'd like to begin by thanking the McKercher LLP law firm for sponsoring our lecture series. They have been supporters for a number of years, and we are very grateful. This year's events may look a little different, but we promise that the topics will not only be informative and educational, but also relevant to what's happening in our world today. David Stack, QC, is a partner in the Saskatoon office, where he practices in the areas of civil litigation, administrative law, employment and labor law, and corporate and commercial law. There's not much David doesn't do, actually. He has recorded some welcoming remarks, and we're going to play those for you now.
McKercher LLP has had the privilege of being a proud supporter of this lecture series since its start in 2014. The decision to support the College of Law in these lectures was an easy one for us, as we understand firsthand the great job that the college does in educating and preparing successful lawyers. Education, knowledge, and innovation are crucial in securing the future success of our province. Our support for this initiative provides a catalyst for provoking thought, enhancing collaboration, and engaging future leaders. With the transition of these lectures to the virtual format, we hope that this will provide an even greater opportunity for the College of Law to enlighten and engage students, lawyers, in our community on these important topics. Stay safe, be well, and enjoy.
Today, we kick off part 1 of Re-Envisioning Policing in Canada. Given recent occurrences in our country and beyond, the degree to which policing has become a topic of intense interest in the last number of months, and the degree to which public officials have become engaged on the issue, has inspired the College of Law to propose this lecture series to explore the topic further. Our first speaker of this 4-part series is Gerry McNeilly, the former director of the Independent Police Review Agency of Ontario. Gerry McNeilly was appointed Ontario's first independent police review director in June of 2008 and served for 12 years in that role until March of 2019. He was responsible for receiving, managing, and overseeing all public complaints against police in Ontario. The Office of the Independent Police Review Director receives an average of 3,000 complaints a year. It's a significant responsibility. I'm acquainted with Mr. McNeilly through some work that I have also done in the area of civilian oversight of police. Mr. McNeilly has been one of Canada's leaders in this field almost from the inception of his having taken up that position in 2008. He is also a dynamic speaker and an insightful thinker, and I think you are in for a real treat today. To give you an example of some of the seminal work that Gerry has done, in 2012, his office released the first systemic review report, which provided an in-depth analysis of issues surrounding police complaints involving the G20 summit in Toronto in June of 2010. During his time, Mr. McNeilly released 4 additional systemic review reports. One report on OPP practices for DNA canvases, one on police interaction with people in crisis and use of force, one on broken trust, Indigenous people, and the Thunder Bay Police Service. Many of you will be familiar with that, work with which my colleague Senator Sinclair, Murray Sinclair, was associated, and the Golden Rule, a review of police strip searches in Ontario, all significant systemic examinations of police practices. Mr. McNeilly is also trained as a mediator who has conducted mediation in a wide range of areas, including family law, child welfare, administrative and civil law, as well as community mediation. But he is most known for and most distinguished for his work in oversight of policing, working with police, and identifying ways in which their work can be better for us all. Mr. McNeilly.
Thank you, Senator Carter, for that introduction. Good day. My name is Jerry McNeilly. My following remarks on this most timely and necessary subject of reimagining policing and racial minorities, I hope and expect will provide you with challenging and provoking thoughts. I hope my comments will be challenging and provoking. And I hope my views will encourage you to continue to advance open discussion in this area. Also, by having these discussions, it will lead us to consideration to pursue changes and possible solutions to enhance the relationship between citizens and the police. Let me say that those of us privileged to be in law school, to become lawyers, are, in my view, given an opportunity to be critical thinkers, to always follow the law wherever she may lead you, and to always do the right thing, to always act without fear, without favor, and without being, and always be unbiased. I know you may have seen a little bit about my background, but I think it's necessary for me to elaborate a little bit, only because I want to highlight my experience in the areas of oversight and my experience particularly in the areas that I'm hoping to talk about. I've been a lawyer for all my career, and but I've always come in and out of law. What I mean by that? I mean that I practice law, I practice family law, administrative law primarily, and at times I felt it necessary to take on some other challenges, some other work, such as I was fortunate to be involved in helping establish and create the Unified Family Court system, firstly in Ontario and then in Canada. That's a system that put all family matters in one place. I was also, and after that, I went back and practiced law again. And 5 years later, I had an opportunity to become an adjudicator to deal with human rights matters from a tribunal perspective. And shortly after that, I was given the opportunity to establish that tribunal as a standing tribunal, not an ad hoc matter. It was a Schedule III tribunal, an adjudicator body. And in that, I brought mediation because I really believe in mediation. I'm fully trained mediator. And subsequent to that, I again went back and practiced law. And maybe you can say, what is wrong with this person? Well, maybe I'm still practicing law because I haven't got it correct yet. But I keep trying. I was given the opportunity to do something quite different from what I've done. I went to Manitoba to take up the challenge of running Legal Aid Manitoba and in fact rejuvenating a 25-year-old organization, which was the mandate given to me by the board. I did that for about 8 to 9 years, and then I decided to come back home to Toronto. And there I started up my practice again, only to be tapped on the shoulder and given an opportunity to establish and create the civilian oversight body known as the OIPRD, Office of the Independent Police Review Director. And that I did for the last 11 or so years before retiring. Right now, I practice, I do consultations and mediations in all areas of law. I've also had an opportunity of doing some international work. For example, I assisted with the development of the Caribbean Police Oversight Organization in Trinidad and Tobago, and I also did work with the oversight body in Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. I then also later on in my career did some work in Nigeria in regards to their policing issues, which are similar to some of the issues we're talking about here today. And lastly, I spent the last 6 months in 2019 before COVID-19 came upon us, helping the organization there do a review in regards to the protests in Hong Kong that's been ongoing for more than a year. That hopefully will put it into context why I'm passionate about this area. I'm passionate about policing. I'm passionate about the police and the public and how we can work together to make it better. So public or civilian oversight is absolutely necessary to ensure public confidence in policing. But public oversight, in my opinion, must be independent. It must be civilian run. It must be free from governmental guidance and oversight. This, in my opinion, is one of the main challenges that faces police and the public in regards to this area. Without oversight, without civilian oversight, there will be little checks and balances over police and their interaction with the public to ensure the legitimacy of police and the work they do and the public they serve. Policing is a service industry, and it's absolutely necessary that we have confidence in that work. Establishing this legitimacy is important to maintain trust, while at the same time allowing police to carry out the state's authorities that we have bestowed upon them of peace, order, and goodwill. And that's necessary to curb any tyranny over policing and public groups. This also adds to the public demands for fairness and confidence in policing. Policing and the public have and will continue to attract and demand challenges, discussions, and modernization. Sir Robert Peel, often referred to as the father of policing, pronounced a number of principles referred to as the Peelian principles. I'm sure you may have heard about him if you've read any literature in regard to policing. And his principles were created to guide police and the public. In this regard, in particular, in Principle 7, he said this: the police are the public and the public are the police. I usually paraphrase this for my own use by saying the police need the public and the public need the police to ensure that police act judicially and legally, given the extraordinary powers that we as a society have granted them. It is with this principle in mind that I will focus my thoughts as I share them with you. Policing in a democracy is based on political and structural framework. This framework is based on the government being responsible to create and oversee that police officers should be representative of the communities they serve and live in. This framework must be followed by governments and leaders in creating a fine balance to ensure that there is ACT. ACT is my acronym for accountability, confidence, and transparency. And then those things bring trust in policing and police. Over many years, there have been discussions about challenges faced by police and the public and attempts at addressing and correcting them. Recently, these challenges have become more visible, more concerning, and more demanding of change. These challenges are being raised worldwide and very close to home here in Canada and in the United States. Challenges are highlighted by the use of social media and hence more open communication and the sharing of information. Protests against police are becoming the norm, regrettably. Advocacy groups are advancing their concerns and demands and are engaging the public in very different ways from the past. The leaders or participants of these protests are younger and they're more demanding of changes, and in my opinion, that is extremely positive. Police face challenges such as lack of trust, inability for open communication, need for more accountability, issues of confidence and their role and how it's carried out, and mostly, in my opinion, the failure or refusal to eradicate the concept or the reality of the existence of the thin blue line, a reality that perpetuates a brotherhood By the way, it's still referred to as a brotherhood, even though there are many female officers in the profession. This concept of brotherhood, a thin blue line, to cover or protect each other regardless of the cost to their professionalism, because I believe that policing is indeed a profession. This has led, in my opinion, to the diminishing of confidence and trust. Let me help you understand this by illustrating a blue line example that occurred in Toronto, and it came from a complaint filed with the organization I then ran, the OIPRD, when I was director. And here's my example. A 3-year police officer on dry patrol, as they usually do in Toronto, pulled over an erratic driver because he felt that he was driving impaired. He followed the usual process. When someone is pulled over, he arrested him, and then he took him to the police lockup to be processed. It was there that he fully determined that he was indeed impaired, and as he was being processed. While he was doing his work and his paperwork, it came to light that the person he stopped was a police officer from a neighboring jurisdiction. Other officers on the shift, including senior officers that he reported to, said to this young arresting officer that he should not proceed to charge him because he was a brother officer. The young officer, thankfully, who had followed in his father's footsteps in policing, and who was brought up to be honest, who was told by his father to follow the law, to be true to himself, then told his colleagues that he was proceeding to lay the impaired driving charges, which he did. That should have ended the matter, but it did not. What followed thereafter is what brings police and the actions into disrepute, and it reduces the confidence and trust in the profession. This young officer was ostracized. He was followed, and he was subsequently stopped at a later date by his colleagues and charged with speeding. You may ask why this was done. Why would that occur? Well, let me tell you my belief and what this officer said in his interview with us. This was to teach him a lesson, to remind him of the brotherhood code, to remind him that you always look after and take care of brother officers. This is, in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges that's facing police in this modern world. I tell you this story to explain one aspect of this challenge, the challenges faced by police and citizens. These scenarios, regrettably, play out in many different ways and incarnations. I want to share with you another story that is quite personal in a way. Personal because it involves someone that I love and I think about a lot and very dearly. And so in that vein, let me make full disclosure. My eldest daughter is a police officer in Ontario, not in Toronto, thankfully. And she has given me permission to share this story. Having said that, that should tell you, given my previous comments already and my comments to come, that I'm a firm supporter and believer in police and policing. But I also am a firm believer in that it must be done correctly. It must be done fairly. It must be done appropriately, and it must be done legally. My daughter is biracial, as I am, and she's a woman. And she joined the police services some 29 years ago when there weren't not many female in the profession. So she faced a lot of difficulties from her male colleagues. She faced the fact that she was a woman, so sexism. She faced the fact that she was biracial, so racism. And she faced the fact that she was not your usual type of police officer that chummed around with others. She was a very quiet woman and kept to herself. But what happened, there were some incidents that happened, and she was told very clearly this by her superior officers. If you don't hang out with us, if you don't party with us, if you don't partake with us, then we will believe you're not one of us. And when you need help, we may not be there to assist you. Frightening, but true. So I can tell you that what I've just related to you, these two incidents, and other incidents that I'm sure you've heard about, in my view, present the biggest challenges facing police. And that biggest challenge is to eradicate the concept, to eradicate the practice of the thin blue line and its use in daily occurrences still. This perception creates a challenge for the police as the public gets, but public trust gets eroded because the public is aware of this. And the public sees it and the public believes it. And how are we to gain confidence and trust from the police? How are we to reimagine relationships between police and the public if we can't overcome some of these issues that linger in the background? In my opinion, therefore, to build the trust, the public must be assured that officers will always act by doing the right thing and not act to ensure that they're only governed by this thin blue line. Look, not everybody would agree with me on what I've just said, but I can tell you from my experience that what I've just told you is a reality. I am not naive to think this will go away, but as I stated in one of my recommendations in a review report I did on the G20, and these reviews under the legislation of the OIPRD allowed me to review matters of incidents where there was a pattern of behavior or where there were issues that needed to be addressed in a more full way as opposed to just a conduct investigation. These reviews are something like an inquiry, except there's no viva voce evidence. My report on the G20 that occurred in Toronto, called Policing the Right to Protest, was released in May 2012. I commend to you that you should read it. Specifically in my recommendation 11 of some 44 recommendations, I said this, that all Ontario, and I should have said all over Canada, police services and all senior officers must take responsibility for ensuring that policies, obligations, and requirements of good policing are met. Senior officers especially should not condone or distance themselves from the misdeeds or misconduct of subordinates or colleagues. To condone any inappropriate behavior is to bring great disrespect to police and policing, and therefore weakens the public confidence in police. Now, I'll stop there. The recommendation goes on further with some subsections. But on a positive note, I can say in my experience, there's improvement in this area. So I don't want it to be taken that things are that bad that we're not getting better. We are in fact getting better. So we're improving, but it's a continuous struggle to achieve that improvement. But we still have a long way to go. The public citizens, on the other hand, they also face many challenges. They face challenges of high expectation of those hired to protect us and how they should behave and carry out their roles, of poverty, of misplacement, of not seeing police as a reflection of themselves. For example, they don't look like us, they therefore don't understand us, of an increase in low-level crimes within their neighborhoods, of over-policing, of mistreatment, of being marginalized, and of ongoing systemic racism. And I'll talk a little more about that later on. These beliefs, these views, these feelings, they are real. They are not far-fetched. They are not idle. They're not ill-advised perceptions. Just ask any Black or visible minority or marginalized person or community, and they'll fill in the blanks for you. It's real, and these groups live them daily, some more than others, not just in the policing arena, but in other societal constructed areas like employment, education, housing, just to highlight a few. In my opinion, our society therefore suffers from a lack of true justice, true fairness, and true equality. I know you may think I'm being really strong on these points, but I am purposefully to invoke some discussion and some from you. But what I've just said is not a criticism. It's a recognition that we cannot accept the status quo. Discrimination in many different forms and ways is real. Implicit bias is real. We need to focus on real change and what that would look like. Discussions and communications paths must be open, and we need to understand and accept that in order to bring about reimagining of policing and citizens' relationships and relations, we need to change the way we deal with marginalized people and groups. But responsibilities in meeting these challenges are also factors that has to be accepted and acted upon by all. That is to say, citizens who are challenged, who are frustrated by the norms of policing, who believe they should not be treated differently or should not be policed by traditional methods. They need to take responsibility for working, for cooperating with police organizations and police, especially when they are requested. In my view, citizens meeting this challenge will lead to meeting and addressing, firstly, the communication challenge we have that I believe is one of the big issues and big challenges facing this reimagining, and open up avenues for change and improvement. And secondly, this will start to employ that Peelian principle I talked to you about of the people need the police and the police need the people. Again, I'm not naive to believe this solution will fix the issues. Plus, I know of what I speak when I talk about differential treatment. So here's a personal anecdote. And it's important for me to tell little stories, I believe, so to help put things into context, to help give a reference point from someone like me sharing some of these comments with you. I bought my first car at 16 years old, the same day I got my driver's license here in Toronto. And I'm sure some of you may have gone through that process and that excitement. About a year later, I was now about 17 years old. I'm returning home at about 9:30 p.m. I had a curfew at 10 p.m. We had curfew in those days. From visiting my girlfriend who lived in the west end of Toronto. I lived in the east end of Toronto. I was stopped and pulled over by two police officers. They asked me questions, many, such as where I was going, where I was coming from, what was I doing in this area, and then they said to me, "Get out of your car." I asked why. I was told, "Get out of your car." They then proceeded to search my car. They dislodged my back seat, the part of my glove compartment, my trunk, and then they searched me. All without authority. As you know, you study law. They gave me no reason for the personal search, firstly. They gave me no reason for the vehicle search, secondly. When I asked why did they stop me? Why were they doing this? I was told to shut up. I was told to only speak when I'm spoken to and when they asked me to. After a while, they told me I can go. I can leave. Just get in your car and leave. But don't let us see you in this area again. But I persisted in asking questions about why I was stopped and searched. I knew then and before then that I wanted to be a lawyer. So as you know, one of the traits of a good lawyer is to keep asking questions. Hopefully you'll get the answer you're seeking. Again, I was told to shut up, except that this time they got a little verbally abusive. They used racist words towards me. They called me names. They warned me, and they threatened me that if I did not get in my car and leave, that I was going to be arrested for obstructing police. From what? I don't know. Not being one to give up easily, I got in my car and I drove to the police station in the area to make a complaint. I then spoke to the staff sergeant, who told me I should be on my way. Nothing happened. Just go along, Sonny. Go home. Again, I asked for an explanation, and I persisted. And I told him I was not leaving till I was told why I was stopped, why my car was searched, why my person was searched. His explanation was, wait for this, that they were looking for a black male in his 20s, driving a gray Pontiac car with white interior, and that I fit the description. Except, remember, I'm 17 years old. And the car I was driving was a Dodge Cornet. You may not know what that car is. They don't make them anymore. It's a square, big square car. That was black with a red interior. Now, you can say to yourself, oh, well, these things doesn't really happen. Well, let me tell you this. They still happen. They happen today. Today, people are still faced with this type of interaction with police officers. It happens specifically to Black, Indigenous, and marginalized citizens. And so this is a huge challenge for citizens. It's a huge challenge for police. And we must collectively, that's why I'm so happy that you have in this series of discussions and presentations, we must work collectively to correct and end this type of discrimination and systemic occurrences. But again, on a good note, and I always like to think about positives. I wouldn't be doing what I've been doing all my life if I didn't think there was hope. It seems like Canada is willing to move to address this issue. Recently, I read in the Toronto Star newspaper that the federal government have struck a special committee made up of the Justice Minister and the Minister of Public Safety and tasking them to draft a plan around, as they call it, justice reform and modernizing police structures and updating the standards on use of force. The Public Safety Minister, Bill Blair, the previous chief of Toronto Police and chief at the time of the G20, said, part of the review that we're going to be doing is to pursue the dismantling systems that perpetuates racism, and that legislation will be tabled that will strengthen oversight and increase public trust in policing services. I support and I commend this initiative. But I'll wait and see what journey it takes, because talking is one thing, doing is another thing. So if I may leave a word of advice for those of you who may speak to Minister Blair, please share this with him. Please ensure, Minister, that diverse voices and opinions are part of the review and that meaningful participation is had so as not to perpetuate the status quo. So let's all stay tuned and see what this positive initiative will accomplish. While it may be argued that some or most of the issues arising that cause or bring about challenges facing policing and citizens may stem from particular incidents or particular areas and communities or particular emergent patterns or particular emergent protests or causes, it does not address the real reasons for these continuing needs for discussions and reviews. It's very important, this subject that you are looking at of reimagining policing and communities. It's very important because it gives a foundation, it gives a start to try looking at some of these issues. It gives a start to trying to develop some solutions to the prevailing issues. In my opinion, the argument I just stated above, while it has some merit, as I've said, and while I've heretofore highlighted some of the challenges and causes, I must now delve into what I believe to be, in my opinion, the real reason, the real problem that needs our collective attention. Not everyone will agree with me, but again, I'm sharing with you my views, my thoughts, and my feelings from my years of experience. That real reason is the ugly truth of systemic racism and its roots. My role here, though, is not to give you a sociological dissertation on race and society. I don't do that. But I want to tell you that systemic racism is alive, it's real, and it's applied daily. Just look to the USA and what's going on there, and look to other countries, including Canada, for evidence of this. To put a bit of context to my remarks, I also recommend that you read my December 2018 report titled Broken Trust, Indigenous People and the Thunder Bay Police Services, and its 42 recommendations. In October 2015, the body of an unidentified Indigenous male was found in McIntyre River in Thunder Bay. 3 hours after the discovery of the body, Thunder Bay Police issued a news release stating that an initial investigation did not indicate a suspicious death, and that a post-mortem examination will be conducted to determine exact cause of death. Just 23 hours later, after the discovery of the body, Thunder Bay Police issued another news release identifying the deceased and stated that his death was non-criminal in nature. When questioned by the family and others, the police put out the following theory: that the deceased, the victim, had passed out from consuming alcohol and simply rolled 9 or 10 feet down the riverbank into the river, and he drowned. For the rest of the story, regrettably, you'll really have to read my report, but I can give you a sense of how this story ended. Through my review and subsequent police investigation by another police service, it was determined that someone was actually responsible for contributing to his death. He apparently was having a fight with someone who pushed him into the river, was unable to help him out of the water, and left. That person confessed on a deathbed about a year later and indicated how sorry she was that she caused his death. The moral of that story is that Thunder Bay Police did not choose to look into this matter because this victim was an Indigenous man. In my report, after reviewing numerous cases investigated by Thunder Bay Police involving Indigenous sudden deaths and disappearances in Thunder Bay, and conducting numerous interviews, hundreds of interviews with First Nations communities, Thunder Bay public at large, police services, current police services members, previous police services members, and anyone else who would talk to me, I concluded that not only was there investigative deficiencies, there was also lack of experience. And most importantly, officers did not know what they did not know. Then, that there was pervasive and continuous systemic racism at an institutional level, and that the Thunder Bay Police failed on an unacceptably high number of occasions to treat or protect Indigenous victims or their families equally and without discrimination. Why? Because of them being Indigenous. Many of the deaths were characterized as suspicious and non-criminal because they never really fully investigated them because of the biases and the perception about the victims that they were dealing with. This particular finding, I have to tell you, was difficult for me to make, not because it talked about or acknowledged the existence of systemic racism, but because for all too long, the Indigenous population, the Black population, the marginalized communities have been living these inequalities and demanding change to these factors of discrimination and the differential treatment they face. But they have been met with little or no acknowledgement from the majority society. They weren't believed. In other words, they were meeting roadblocks, they were meeting disbelief, they were meeting silence. They were and continue, thankfully, to demand change. That is why it's difficult for me to talk about this. Given what others and I know now, what we knew then, and is that this perception was real and was being met from denial. And my findings, I'm glad to say that the population in Thunder Bay, especially the indigenous population, thanked me because it was a vindication of long-held grievances, and that what they have been saying for decades was an actual reality. But to highlight this, when I talk about systemic racism and bias in my concerns from Thunder Bay Police Service, and I want to say that what I've described and what I'm talking about exists more or less in other police services in different ways. But having said that, before I tell you my next story, I'm happy to say that policing is making great efforts to change, to reimagine themselves, to become modernized, and that's very positive. And this discussion, this series of lectures, leads in that direction. I can tell you, there are many new police chiefs around Canada. I call them the nouveau police chiefs because they come with a different makeup, a different mindset. They understand that policing needs to change, must change, and it has to become more community minded. But let me regale you with an incident in regards to Thunder Bay and some of my interviews, but I'm only going to tell you about one. In interviewing a staff sergeant who supervised the public community section, I asked a number of questions, obviously, and in one of my questions, I asked, how do you perceive an Indigenous person when you encounter them, Staff Sergeant? Without blinking an eye. And here I have to apologize for the harshness of his words. He said, I see them as no good, drunk Indians who has to be arrested and locked up. I then asked him, because I'm a lawyer, I'm going to ask more questions. But what if you encounter an Indigenous person who's dressed like me? At the time, I was wearing a suit and a tie, and I did have a briefcase with me. Again, without missing a beat, he said, a no good, lazy, drunken Indian up to no good who needs to be arrested. This story goes on. I did not put all of that in my report because it was too salacious and I didn't want it to take away from the nature and tenor of my report, and because I thought it would be negative in nature. So I left it out of my report, but I share that story because it's what I encountered. Amazing, you should say, and surprised, you should say about that, but he went further and he informed me and my lawyer who was with me that he informs all of his subordinates, anyone who reports to him and his colleagues, that this is how they should consider any Indigenous citizens that they encounter in their daily duties and responsibilities. This is partly why it was very easy for me to find that systemic racism exists in Thunder Bay Police Institution, as knowledge of officers like him. And this is a problem. It's what I talk about when I talk about the thin blue line. Are accepted and they are promoted, because he has been promoted. As of after I finished my report, he was now an inspector. So he's promoted for spouting his views. Now I admit, not all Thunder Bay police officers subscribe to his view, because I met many of them who did not, many of them who apologized for their colleagues, many of them who recognize that some of what's going on is incorrect and wrong and want to make change, but they're faced with the thin blue line. And so I don't want to leave it that all the Thunder Bay police officers are like that, but there are enough of them. And when the senior structures in police services do not speak out and make changes to these views and beliefs, then we have a real difficulty in facing this challenge in this reimagining of policing and reimagining of police and society. So this story, as you can see, is a big challenge from my perspective, and the public is to accept and recognize that there exist what is referred to as unconscious bias, or explicit or implicit bias. And we all have to work to overcoming these obstacles through open and real discussion. We have to talk about it. We have to acknowledge it. And calling people in about it, we also have to call people on it. when we believe that they are doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, in order for us to advance and improve these changes. So let me summarize a little bit what I believe to be some changes to meet that are needed to meet some of these challenges. I wish we had an opportunity to have a tete-a-tete open discussion, but maybe that will come later and you can discuss some of these issues. So let's call them my top 10 or my top 12. There needs to be an acknowledgement that change in police-citizens relationship is urgently required. And are you on the cusp of that? We need to continue to create and expand civilian oversight which must be independent. It must be civilian run. It must be free from governmental direction and oversight. These civilian organizations must be governed by a legislation that clearly lays out its role for both its interaction with the public and its interaction with the police. We need openness and the ability to participate and engage in discussions. Some discussions we may not like, but discussions are absolutely necessary. We need to understand that the police need the people and the people need the police. We can't function in a democracy without that concept. We need to get rid of the existence and the operation and the application of the thin blue line. Public acknowledgement that the public must cooperate and assist the police when necessary is extremely crucial. The public must realize that they have to work with the police and police organization in order for us to achieve some of these goals and get some positive movement in the relationships between police and the communities that they serve. In building confidence and trust, that's a two-way street. We have to do that. There needs to be more responsibility to ensure ACT, my acronym again, occur. That is that there's accountability, there's confidence, there's transparency, there's trust in policing and police, and in the community from the police perspective. We need to recognize that issues of individual and systemic discrimination and racism is real and we need to openly address that. We have to talk about it, folks. Your quest in this subject matter of reimagining policing, you have to continue to pursue it. That's one of the only ways we're going to get to this modernization of police structure and modernization of the interactions between police and the public. We need to return to Peel's view of the police being in and part of the community. Therefore, we need more community policing. We need more community outreach and involvement by police with different organizations and ethnic groups. We need to develop within police more of a specialization of certain aspects of community policing, such as there need to be specialized units to work in conjunction with others in the social and health areas, mental health, for example, people dealing with poverty, all these calls that come into police. We need to structure a new way as in how policing will involve responding to some of these calls that may not necessarily need a policing interaction. We need more proactive initiatives with community organization and services, and social media vehicles must be more utilized. We have to get on with improving our social media interaction with the public. And body-worn cameras, in my opinion, I'm a proponent of that, are absolutely necessary to assist in this area. Lastly, we need to accept that there will continue to be challenges to meet and overcome. This will always be there. So in closing, let me say, in a movement towards your reimagining policing within the context of policing of racial minorities, it's challenging, but they're not insurmountable challenges. I've hopefully tried to give you some sense of some of the things that collectively can be done. A challenge that is both timely, it's necessary given the landscape currently that the public, and yes, the police are demanding for change. They are demanding for improvement and for recognition that without addressing and repairing these issues that create conflict between the police and the public, we would have lost our will to call ourselves the holders of truth, fairness, and justice in this democracy. You are the new ones. You are the new torchbearers. You and your cohorts in Canada, around the world, can make a difference. You are making a difference. You've already begun by having these discussions. One of my idols, Nelson Mandela, said this: "Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." This means to me that we have to continue working at this, regardless of how many times it seems that we are not succeeding. While we have all been touched by this pandemic in different ways and unequal ways, we need to have and continue discussions about challenges and changes. We need to accept that we're all part of the problem, and therefore we must all be part of the solution, the changes. We need to communicate. We need to listen, to acknowledge others, and to correct collectively the wrongs of humankind. A good start is with accepting and working with our differences and being mindful of the existing power imbalances. So I close by saying, we cannot stop working towards positive change, even when we fail, as every failure brings success and advancement. We're making headway, folks, because every bump encountered on our road to healing, to reconciliation, or eradicated racism and poverty, there is some success. And your reimagining is a sign of that. So I hope I've left you with some food for thought, and I hope that my comments will move you to have open discussions about what I've said in this subject area. It was my pleasure, my privilege to share with you these comments, these thoughts. I hope they have been helpful. Thank you, and stay safe.
Thank you, Gerry, for a really outstanding presentation. And I want to also thank all of you who have joined us online to attend. We hope you can join us again next Tuesday, October 13th, the day after Thanksgiving, for episode 2 of Re-Envisioning Policing in Canada with Cree author and lawyer Harold Johnson. I'll be back with you then. Thank you very much.